you very much for everything you do. Everybody on the committee, thank you very much as well. We're going to be talking about veterinary IT security. It's a huge subject, so we're going to narrow this thing down, and we're going to narrow it down quite a bit to one particular variant that we need to be concerned about. Something's recent, you may have seen in the news. It's called ransomware. Has anybody heard of it? Right. Okay, anybody here had to deal with it personally? A couple hands. Anybody here know any veterinary clinics and hospitals that had to deal with this? Okay, so you've seen it. So we know it's there. Ransomware, obviously what the picture says here is thieves are holding the keys to your data. They want to hold the keys. They want you to pay money to get your information back. So as IT pros, we're seeing this as probably the single biggest threat out there today. There is a disconnect, though, between business owners, small business owners, and IT pros. This is changing because mainstream media right now is really pushing this in the news of really publicizing specifically the latest ransomware attacks that really started ramping up in May and June of this last year. But there is a disconnect. So as IT pros, this is something that's definitely keeping me up, and it was keeping me up around the April timeframe when we started seeing from Microsoft some notifications of some potential zero-day threats. Like a zero-day threat is basically, this is something immediately you need to install in your system now because something is going to come. And of course, May comes, and we see a big attack vessel that occurred. So recently, as about 4 or 5 months ago, I was attending a Denver lunch of IT pros, and I asked the same question was asked in the room. How many people here have dealt with or have had to deal with ransomware? Every single IT professional in that room raised their hand. When I was looking around that room, I said, we have a problem. We have an epidemic that we have to try to figure out, and we have to resolve and make sure that we stay on top of. So let's talk about the history. This history of this ransomware was really started in 2012. That's when it really came out. 2013, mainstream. That's when we really started seeing the hit. So we saw things like crypto wall, crypto locker. That was basically the first irradiations of this was basically get on the machine and lock the machine out. Then we see it progress and say, okay, get on the machine, but start reaching out to network shares, or if you had mapped network drives. So in a clinic or hospital, that could be their HR files, it could be their Cornerstone files, it could be their Avromark files, and it could take those out as well. We saw a 165% increase from quarter 4 2014 to quarter 1 of 2015. Huge. And we don't have the numbers for 2016 yet. They're still running the survey for us, but we're going to see that number just continue to increase. And then May, the WannaCry comes out. WannaCry makes it even worse. So it not only comes down and affects the machine, and it can also reach out to the shares, but the bad guys figured out a way, unfortunately, through exploited or leaked NSA security tools. And 2 main tools that were leaked were this Eternal Blue, and it was called the double pulsar. So Eternal Blue was the exploit that we had a patch in Microsoft. Microsoft's come out with a patch, and it was released in March. But now this thing gets on computers, and it can scan and start hitting every single computer in the network and spread itself across those computers. So we have a statement in our industry is we don't want to pay the ransom. If we don't pay the ransom, this threat goes away. 42% of the people that were paying that were infected by this ransom had to pay the ransom. 42% of people that were infected with this didn't have a method or a methodology to get out of that situation, so they had to pay. 1 in 4 of those, 25%, they never got their data back. You're dealing with crooks. You know, how reliable are these people to actually give your information back? So WannaCry was in May. June, Petya comes out. Petya, if you don't know, but Petya's tied. In order to pay these guys, you have to pay them by bitcoins. So in order to pay these guys, you have to communicate with them. Petya had one single email address tied to it. The government shut that down. So nobody, 100% of the people that got Petya in June have no way of communicating with the thieves to even try to get their data back. It's crazy. So we're seeing, big corporation names on this. We're seeing in the news, but it's hitting everyone. It's hitting every industry, and it's definitely a threat within the veterinary space. You see companies like in May, Merrick. Everybody knows Merrick. Merrick got taken out by WannaCry. In June, Nuance. If anybody familiar with Dragon Natural Speak, the medical transcription company, they're still getting out of that from June of this last year, June 28th. So how is this spread? Well, number one, comes in through spam, phishing, email attachments. So you'll get a link, phishing. Anybody know what phishing is? They're trying to get you, the human, to make the mistake by clicking links, etc., that are coming in. The WannaCry was fake invoices. It maybe came in like a zip attachment, and once it gets on there, it starts spreading like crazy. And the AV products, antivirus products, are not catching this. Your traditional AV products are not catching this stuff. It's coming in through exploit kits. So the Angular exploit kit. So this is, okay, on your PC or Mac or whatever you may have all these other pieces of software on there. Things like your favorite browser, maybe your Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome. You may have other products on there like Java, Adobe, Flash. You may have Silverlight to be able to run multimedia. Those are all attack vessels. So if you just go to a website, and it's a website that has this Angular exploit kit, what it's going to do, it's going to probe and figure out, what do you have? Oh, you have Java 6. I have a perfect piece of code I can slide right in, and it's called a drive-by download, and it goes in and it affects the machine. So they're getting in by these exploit kits and by unpatched third-party software. And then the new worming effect. So if it hits this machine, boom, it's got that one and that one as well. So again, this is based on 2015. Crypto locker was king. We're going to see this change. That's last year's data. So what is this costing, right? So it's on average, we're seeing about, the bad guys asking. They're asking for it in Bitcoin, by the way. It's not regular money. It's anonymous funding that you have to go. And we'll talk a little bit about the difficulty of doing that. But $300 to $500. But what's ironic about this is they're starting these thieves are getting smarter. So they're figuring out who you are based off your IP address, what your zip code is, and they're going to base the ransom based on what the cost of a Big Mac is, McDonald's Big Mac is in that territory. So in New York City, Big Mac is more expensive than in Peoria, Illinois. So they know, okay, this is coming from Peoria, Illinois. I don't want to go too high because they aren't going to pay it, but I don't want to go too low if it's New York because I may be leaving money on the table. So we've typically seen that $300, $400 mark, but it's right usually about under the $1,800 mark. Anybody know why it's under $1,800 to get your data back? Any guesses? What's that? Close, yeah. It's the FBI's limit of $2,000 a reportable offense to the FBI. So anything on the radar of 2,000, really the FBI is not going to do much for you, right? There's rumors that the FBI, because they're getting inundated with this, is going to raise that to try to substitute a lot of these claims that are coming in for the 2,000 and over. But if they know they have you, like Hollywood Presbyterian they knew they had some very, very important, valuable data, Hollywood Presbyterian had to pay $17,000 to get their data back because they knew what they had. They knew there's value there. They would have had to gouge them. But they were down, locked out for 10 days. And they pretty much said, if we don't pay, we're going to be out of business. So let's talk about how we protect ourselves from this. So have we seen this as IT pros in our own organization? Yes. But we have not seen this hit us for 3 years. So we feel at this point we have a proven method of at least now of at least stopping it for now. But we're continuing to keep our eyes on this to figure out, what are the bad guys doing and how are they how are they morphing and how are they changing? So the number one, education. You have educate your employees. You have to educate the practice managers, have to have this as a regiment to talk about within the clinics, to talk about how they have to have an acceptable use policy. The employees have to sign off on that acceptable use policy to assure that they're not using those computer assets for personal use. So we saw one variant come in because somebody checked their personal email, clicked the link, and it took down one of the systems and out the network share, and we were able to recover. It was only 15 minutes of lost data. We got it back, and it didn't have to pay the ransom, but we have to educate them at that point. No more personal email on this network. You can't do it. Ironically, last year when we were in Las Vegas, I took a walk up the strip. People handing out DVDs. You see those guys? You ever see those guys handing out the DVDs of the music they want you to play? Yeah, I'm not going to grab that. I'm not putting that on my computer. I'm going to let you know that. Because I don't think they're making the money on the music. I think they'll make the money on holding you hostage to your own information. USB drives found in parking lots, important HR files labeled on the USB drive. Yeah, but again, there was one business that did find that. The employees were trained. They actually handed it to the IT pro. He stuck it in the computer. He got in trouble. He got fired because it took down the whole network. But but at least that environment was educated and understood. If you find these things laying around, right, you just don't go picking them up and sticking them in a computer. So we train our clinics and hospitals, really, they should have segregated Wi-Fi, public and private. We know employees are going to come in and they're going to have their smartphone and they want to attach. We've even seen kiosks for employees to use that are completely segregated from the network, so they can check their personal stuff and keep it off the network. And if that machine goes down, that's fine, but it's not going to take the rest of the business down. But security. AV, antivirus, but antivirus isn't enough. If you remember, antivirus is signature-based. And what's happening is these malwares, remember that slide I said CryptoLocker's king right now? And we're going to see that change. Well, we're already seeing that change because once it infects the machine, it's got code to change itself, to change the MD hash. It's a hash file, and then start ripping that back out again, and now it's a brand new variant, and the AV companies can't keep up on that. So it has to have, an AV, but an anti-malware or malicious code type of software prevention in place to stop this. Web security. So web security is, we use Cisco. I'm going to give you a disclaimer here. I'm going to give you what we use, but please don't take that as an endorsement of the product. It's why we're using it. So we use OpenDNS, which was purchased by Cisco. So it's called Cisco Umbrella now. And that web security, especially for roaming laptops, if the doctor takes that off site and is doing work, they're still protected by this umbrella cover. So if the CryptoLocker gets on the machine, the malware gets on the machine, what OpenDNS does, when it tries to call home to get those encryption keys, it stops in its tracks, alerts us, and says, hey, you got a problem here, and this computer may need to be cleaned up. Hopefully it was stopped in its tracks, but you have to have this web security. Business class firewall. So we see clinics and hospitals, in a lot of cases when we do these network assessments, we go out and provide these network assessments, and we see, the Cisco, the same router I would have at my home. It's not business class. Business class has a security-based subscription that you have to purchase with it. So business class meaning security subscription, and that way every single packet that's coming in and out of that network is looked at. Malformed packets are discarded. It has AV signatures as well as the ability to stop attachments like zip files and things from even getting through into the network. But it's got to have that service. Patching of the operating system. So again, Microsoft came up with that patch for the Eternal Blue exploit, which is the WannaCry is using as well as Petra's using. So you have to stay on top of regiment of making sure your operating system is patched. The third-party patching of software. So that's again back to the Java, the Adobe, the Flash, the Chrome, the Silverlight. If you have QuickTime that runs out of Windows box, you should remove it because QuickTime is no longer supported by Apple. And if you have an older version, that's a drive-by download exploit. That exploit kit can get you on that. So keeping systems down. If you don't need Java, get it off the box. If you don't need Firefox, don't use it and don't have it installed. If you're a Chrome user, great, right? but make sure it stays up to date. But the number one thing that's going to protect you is effective backups. Effective backups meaning what we see in traditional backups are, I'm still seeing tape drives, by the way. I go out and I see tape drives, and it's just like, that's from 1960s. This is crazy. We need to get you off tapes, but we saw a progression move to like USB attached drives. That's a locally attached drive. So again, if that thing worms over to the server, infects the server, guess what? The locally attached drive to that server is going to be knocked out with the ransomware too. Therefore, you're going to be stuck in the position where you're going to have to pay the ransom. So we use a product called Datto. Datto is effective because it spins up a share. It will snap a backup, and it will shut the share down. So every hour on the hour throughout the day of these hospitals and clinics, we weren't backing up on an hourly basis, the ransomware is not going to get in. That's how come when the 3 incidences we went through back in 2013, 2014 timeframe, we didn't pay the ransom. We didn't have to. We had an effective system to go back to. So those are the high-level versions. Again, the attachments, and you can stop and you can dive in and get even more technical on this. But as a 50-foot overview, this is a good start. But you have to have a layered approach. You see this? We're not relying on just one software. 5-10 years ago, you can install that consumer-based router, right? That's fine. You can install AV on the system, right? That's fine. Oh, one other thing with AV, it has to be centrally managed as well. So just by having AV on machines, it should be the same flavor across the board. It should be back to centralized management of that. You should be able to tell whether you have issues or not, and you should be able to understand whether scans are occurring on a regular basis. That's effective AV versus just having it installed. But having a layered approach of AV, web security, business class firewall, patching of the operating system, critical third-party patching, and then a fallback plan, that's your success method today. But it's changing, and it's changing fast. I want to share a story. DVM 360. Dr. Phillip considered himself a computer geek. He had a do-it-yourself mentality. He used a cheap backup solution called Backup for All. I've seen it. And thought he was covered until he was hacked. His practice management system was taken down because the files he needed to run his program, I believe it was Avamark, and it was encrypted and it couldn't run. So he was prompted to pay this ransom. So he decided, okay, I'm going to go back to my backups. Well, guess what? The backups, they didn't get infected this time, but all hard drives fail. 100% of all hard drives will fail at some given point. He just didn't recognize that his had failed and he had no backups. So his last backup that he had on file was from June 23rd. This was now October 16th. So he was going to lose 3 months of his information. He didn't want to pay, and he was afraid he wasn't going to get his data back from the thieves, right? Pay this ransom. They were demanding like $3,500 in bitcoins from him. So he started thinking outside the box, and I would have too, and maybe demand force, right? I use demand force. Maybe I can get all those text messages back and figure out how my schedule goes. And demand force, like, yeah, potentially it's not, but this is going to take days, to figure this out. So he started negotiating with the hackers. And they actually, once he reached out, they dropped the price down to 2,000 bitcoins. He started negotiating more, and they said, absolutely not. You have 36 hours to pay me, or we're done. So now he's got to get the bitcoins. Has anybody here had to buy bitcoins? Okay, there's one there. It's not a very easy process. We have a network admin. His name's Sean Fetter in our organization, and Sean knows a lot about this. So I was like, Sean, just show me where you buy these bitcoins. I've never gone through a Bitcoin process before. He's like, yeah, you got to go to this ATM, and you got to bring cash, and you got to go into this. And I said, where's the closest one? He's like, well, here's one off in Colfax Avenue called Vapor King. And I'm like, what? Vapor King off Colfax Avenue, Denver constituents. There's some good and bad areas off Colfax. Not a good area off Colfax. I'm like, I don't think I want to be walking in with cash into the store Vapor King to go buy these bitcoins. But that's how you have to do it. You have to have a Bitcoin wallet ready to go, and you got to get in there. And if it's under $1,000, it's anonymous. If it's over 1,000, they're recording the names now. But it's all anonymous trading. It's supposed to be on the black market. But Bitcoin's been used primarily on what's called the dark web, and the dark web is just a shady area of human trafficking and drugs, and stay out of it, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Sean's a great guy. He's, you know, very, very security conscious. He just knows what's going on there. He stays up on the news, which I love. So he had to go through that process. Okay, so then, you know, so he got it, and he got his data back. So now he's like, okay, you know, he recognized I went ahead and installed OpenDNS. Smart choice. I agree with that. That's a great product. Then he trained his staff not to open zip attachments. That's one way, right? You need to train your staff not to open any untrusted attachments. You need to train your staff not to. So there's a little bit more, I think, there that could have been done. Maybe a business class firewall. He made every workstation and put Windows Defender on it. That's a free version of AV, but again, not centrally managed. So, and then he had backups onto a new local drive. Again, we talked about that. That's still going to be a attack vessel. And since he's paid that ransom, he's a target. The hacker knows he's a target. He's paid. So if there's anything left or any remnants left of this, he's going to get reinfected, and it has proven itself that companies that get hit by ransomware once usually see it 2 to 3 times before they figure out that they have to put much more layers of security in place. And if you go look at the article, I gave you the link here. I didn't put comments on this, but there's 2 other IT pros that did put comments on that. They said, you know, you're still going to be a target here, and what you've done is good, but it's not good enough quite yet for what we're dealing with. Another one, dog charity out of Ottawa, Canada. 1-person company. So she wakes up one morning and gets the nice little message on the screen that all your files are encrypted. She had 15 years of data on there she lost. She's going to lose the business. She wasn't going to pay. Somebody did come forward and actually pay the ransom. It gave her money to pay. She again negotiated with the hackers, saying, you know, they wanted $800 Bitcoin, and they knocked it down. They were nice enough criminals to knock it down in half, 400. But it's, you know, they're still criminals, right? So Sharon, you know, she gave them the sad story, and they didn't care. So this just kind of shows you that it doesn't matter how big or how small you are. If you have a pulse and a wallet, you can be a victim. So Sharon did end up getting, but she had the same struggle. She had to go get the Bitcoin, walk into a shady area. She had to get this all done, but you know, and pay the hackers and finally get their information back. So it doesn't matter, you know, if you're a small clinic, you know, with 1 doctor, a few staff, to a corporate, you know, clinics that you have multiple practice. You could become a victim of this if you don't have the proper protection and threat protection in place, and the good backup. So my intention here was to educate you about this current threat that we're seeing, and I want to just open it up for some questions and comments at this point.